You're listening to the Digital Deep Dive, where we tackle the newest trends, strategies, and pain points shaping growth across the digital landscape. From Amazon and D2C to international expansion, join our host and e-commerce leaders across multiple industries for in-depth discussions on how to maximize your brands in the digital arena. Now, here's your host, Aaron Conant.
Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Conant. Today, we have part two, I would say, of a series I kicked off with Will Nelson from the last episode, which is all around Copilot and Microsoft and kind of their vision for how it will fit into everyday work. And in that conversation from the last episode, we're getting a little bit into, I think, like the everyday office suite and how Copilot fits into there. And I had a lot of questions around that, just how I use it. And here's Will, where I think from the last episode, I was like blown away by the level that the depth that we went into. So we're going to have the second one. But Will, if you want to reintroduce yourself for those that didn't catch the first one, then they can go back and listen to it. But that would be awesome. Brief intro on yourself. And then we can kind of just jump into, like, I don't know if it is Microsoft's like vision, if that's the right way to talk about it, or how people would use Copilot within their office suite. But let's just play with that title.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, thank you again for having me. Glad to be back. And yeah, for the quick background on me, I spend all day at Microsoft in what's called the Copilot Lounge. I'm a Copilot lead. So I bring in executives, very often from the federal government, and we spend anywhere from 90 minutes to 2 hours plus sitting down. It's like elementary school. We've got a laptop cart in the back. So everybody is hands-on keyboards. We spend a little bit of time talking about AI, talking about Copilot, what it is, how it works, why you can trust it, how to get the best out of it. And then we go hands-on and actually start using it across the suite, right? So in Copilot Chat, but then in all the products. And so I think that's what we're going to dive a little bit more specifically in today, is how does it integrate into the rest of the Office suite? How is that differentiated from like a normal chat experience, right? If I just go into any of the sort of LLM chatbots, I can go back and forth with any of them. How does it change? How does that change? How does it become different when we start to actually do that from within the apps that we use every day?
That sounds perfect.
Good.
Yeah, let's just jump right in, because I think that's what a lot of people. I would love to start, if we can, with like Excel.
Mm-hmm.
Just a huge part of my background back when I was, as a scientist at Pfizer and everything. A lot of work done within that platform, and then I just kind of carry that through. I love Excel, and I know there's like Google Sheets that were out there that people use. For me, they were underpowered for the longest time, so I always go back to Excel. How should people bring it into there? Then obviously the PowerPoint and then the Word piece, and let's just jump into it.
Yeah, all the way into Teams and everything else. So let me.
Oh, Teams, yes.
Teams is, I think, one of the most valuable use cases.
Let's start with
get
Teams.
to that.
I'm sorry.
You want to start with Teams? No, perfect. Teams is one of the easiest ones to actually talk about, because there is so much cool stuff happening. I think I mentioned last time, the reason we had to delay the first recording a couple of times, because we get to test out internal stuff at Microsoft, which is really cool. The downside is we can't always talk about what we're using. So I had to wait until some of the stuff got public, including one that we can talk about now. So let's talk about how Copilot works in Teams. Assuming that you're licensed and that you have recording or transcription enabled. And if you want, we can talk about the specific difference between recording a meeting and transcribing a meeting, because there is a meaningful difference. You are going to have a transcript that is auto-generated, that is also auto-translated. If you have multiple people in different languages in the meeting, Copilot can translate in live time for you, which is really fascinating. It's impressive how good it is. And we talked about this a little bit last time. It might have been after we stopped recording, about how good AI is as a universal translator, and not just in language, but across everything, because it is going beyond the tokenized language and actually trying to understand intent and meaning and value. So it's really good at that. And I have a fun anecdote that maybe we'll come back to. So you're in a Teams meeting. You'll see a little Copilot icon up sort of the left of your mute button, and you'll click on that, and you now have a private sidebar for you to interact with Copilot. And you can ask questions about the meeting, and you can say, hey, summarize this meeting so far for me, something pretty simple. Or you can say, give me a readout of any deliverables, or I want an update on project X. Has Jennifer talked about this? You can ask all those things to Copilot. You can ask it to generate an email if you want to read somebody in on the meeting. One of the interesting things you'll notice is that if you ask it, for example, to let's say from this meeting, give me a history of electric vehicles. That's an easy question for AI to answer, right? Like we've all seen that's not a hard problem. It's going to come back and say, That's not germane to the conversation. That's not relevant. I don't have an answer for you right now. And that's not because I can't answer. That's not because we use a weaker model in Teams. But what we do is really aggressively narrow in the context and say, you are only to respond with the context of this transcript from this meeting and any associated, like the meeting invite and some other stuff. But if it's not in there, don't answer, because we obviously are concerned about hallucinations. And so that's a way that we can do that. The narrower of a scope that we give, generally the less hallucinations you have. So the more you drive in and say, only look at this, come with an answer from here, that's where you're going to get those really great results. So that's the first use case. There are a whole bunch more. So this might be a long segment. If we get too in the weeds, let me know. There's a couple others.
No, I think we should go. If we have to do a third one, we have to do it.
That's fine. I got plenty of time. We'll make it work.
The number one thing everybody's using, I shouldn't say, I mean, more than Word or PowerPoint, because there's Canva out there and Excel, is Teams.
Well, it's approachable, right? Like you're in the meeting, you're used to interacting with a sidebar, be it a chat or something else. Like you're used to sort of interacting with something while you're in a meeting. People are double booked constantly. Like I know this is true at Microsoft. People are double booked. They show up late. So now I have the ability to jump into a meeting that I may have missed the first 15 or 20 minutes of. We'll see how long this recording runs if I have to use this right afterwards. And I can come in and just say, summarize the meeting so far. And I know I'm going to get a readout of everything that I missed. Or if I miss the meeting completely, I'm going to get a summary that comes out of the meeting that Copilot's going to auto-generate and drop right into my Teams. That is super, super valuable. So that's one use case, which is just Copilot. The other is that we have the facilitator agent, which you can add to your meetings, that is going to, before the meeting, look at all of the email conversation about that meeting, look at the meeting invite, look at the meeting, look at the attendees, look at the agenda. And it's going to say, all right, cool. It's going to dynamically generate an agenda if one wasn't already created. And then it's going to sit in and listen to your meeting. And it's going to take notes and transcribe everything. It's going to generate those notes. And then about halfway through, and again, all of this is configurable, it's going to bounce in and say, hey, your agenda was these 5 points that you guys wanted to hit, or these 5 decisions you wanted to make. You've done 3, you've got 2 to go. So here's what you haven't covered yet. You might want to pivot the meeting towards this. Or you've only done 1 out of 5, right? Time to start rolling on some of that stuff. Then at the end of the meeting, it's going to send out a recap, say, all right, here's what you covered. Here's all the notes. Here's where you ended up on those specific agenda items. Here's any deliverables that were promised and the specific people that own those. So if I raise my hand and go, yeah, I'll take care of that, sort of hoping nobody was listening, like that's become a problem. You don't really get to do that anymore if facilitator agent is in the meeting. And then again, if you have this set up, you can actually have it reach out to those people. So they say, hey, Aaron's going to provide this particular piece of like this particular piece of data next Tuesday. Well, Monday, Teams is going to follow up with you. Facilitator agent is going to ping you and say, hey, you had promised your coworkers you'd have this form Tuesday. It's Monday. You got it. Do you need time? Do you need anything from me? Can I be helpful? So you now have a facilitator built into every single meeting that is keeping things on track, that's keeping track of things, and that is actually following up to make sure that action items are getting followed through on. So that's another really fascinating one. That was one of the ones that is a little bit newer. And
how do you turn that on?
So that will be an agent. In terms of the actual implementation, it's going to vary a little bit. I don't want to misspeak, so I won't give you specific steps because I think it's going to vary a little bit depending on if you're in a government tenant versus a commercial tenant. So I don't know the instructions step by step. I should be able to follow up with you and send you something that maybe we can put in the show notes or something. But facilitator agent is super cool. The other third fun one is the meeting recaps, which I'm sure we've all
really
seen.
Quick, I was a project manager.
Oh yeah,
a long time. Long time. And the worst is trying to keep on top of all the notes, all the action items,
yes,
all the follow-ups.
Yep.
And if I can just let it go and it helps me out, like I wouldn't again, right? Like an AI assistant, that's what I needed, right? Because nobody wants to do that.
No.
And nobody wants to be the one that sends out all the emails or all the reminders, right? And all the checkups. So
it's like when your kids go to the pediatrician, right? Like when, at least in my pediatrician, they had the nurses always give the immunizations, give the shots, so that if you like didn't like the nurse, that's kind of okay as the kid. If you go like, that lady stabs me every time and I don't really enjoy that. But when the doctor comes in, they're cool. They didn't hurt you. So like, you don't have to be the bad guy anymore. You can let facilitator agent show up and annoy everyone all the time. And then you just get to show up and go, great, this is awesome. Good work, guys. Pat everybody on the back.
But this is that classic case of, it's not going to replace the project manager.
No.
It's going to make them so much more efficient.
Exactly.
And the project managers, and this is, I think, what's popping up over and over and over and over again is AI is not necessarily going to come and totally replace you and you should freak out. AI is a tool. We still need the human involved,
Yes.
human in the loop, right? That everybody talks about. But if you are not using or adapting and using these tools, you will be left behind.
I think that's absolutely true in a lot of ways. And I think there's a couple of takeaways. Like, we talk a lot about minutes on mission when we're thinking about this and showing stuff to people, like, especially in a government use case. How many minutes are you spending on your mission versus on minutia? So when we think about something like this, Aaron, as a project manager, we're putting your minutes back on the actual mission. And like the output of having really great meeting minutes, that is a valuable output. Having that is valuable. The process of creating it is not a valuable process, right? Like, that's not a high value add process. So if we can automate that away, give you the final product, and then say, hey, now you are empowered to go do with these meeting minutes, with these deliverables, what you need to do, track things down and make this happen. That's where I think it's really transformative. And I can't remember if we covered this last time or not, but we talked about the Work Trends Index. So I'll go over this briefly, but Microsoft surveys over 30,000 people across a whole bunch of countries. We look at LinkedIn data. We look at M365 usage data to understand how is work changing? How are we doing work as a society and as both the public and private sector? And one of the takeaways was that we found this class that we called frontier firms that are really out ahead of AI, that are leaning forward on this stuff, that are deploying agents, that are doing a bunch of these things. And when we surveyed their employees, we saw higher job satisfaction. We saw that they felt like they were doing more, they were more optimistic, and they actually feared job loss to AI less. Even though the big business is aggressively adopting not just AI as a system, but also AI as agents, right? AI as sort of team members in some ways. And I think a lot of that comes down to, if you spend your day doing minutia, doing things that really don't feel like it is an actual valuable process, that's not a good feeling, right? You don't feel secure. You don't feel like you are providing value. Versus if you are spending all of your day doing high leverage activities, if you are doing things that are really moving the needle, that are truly productive, that's a much more secure feeling. And that's a much more valuable place. And everybody wins, right? You win as the employee because nobody wants to be doing minutia all day. The company wins because they are getting the best out of you, right? They are using your brain power, not just some like rote hands on keyboard, typing the same thing over and over and over again. And like society wins from a productivity curve, right? Think about there is real impact to people doing more work in the world. So I think that's one of the sort of, it's a little bit of a deeper dive into like societal implications, but there's a really meaningful shift when you start to free up people from minutia and put minutes back on the missions of great businesses.
Yeah. So true. So true.
It's amazing. It's really, I'm excited. Obviously, I think this is, there are concerns with this technology. We need to be conscious. There's a lot of great people spending a lot of time thinking about how we implement this, but I think broadly I fit into a fairly optimistic camp about how this is and will continue to affect the world writ large.
Yeah. No, I love it. And sorry, I interrupted you. I should go into 3.
No, all good. But yeah, so I think there's like Copilot chat in Teams, which is super valuable, which is that narrow scope. Hey, just from this meeting. The other great use case, and now we're jumping all over the place. We went 3, going back to 1, but it's all good. We'll get there. Is acronyms. Like, I spend a lot of time around the federal government. The federal government loves acronyms. So does Microsoft. I especially like early in my tenure, I would sit in meetings and it just was like alphabet soup. I had no idea which way was up. So when I can just be sitting in Copilot chat going, they just talked about this, they just talked about that, what does this mean? And have that private conversation, that's super, super valuable. So that's maybe not a world-changing use case, but it certainly makes it a little bit less awkward or embarrassing to be a new employee that has no background in what you're talking about or the meetings you're sitting in on. But yeah, so that's an easy win. It's just like asking off the side, what are we talking? What is DLP? Like, what is data loss prevention? What does this mean? All right, back to 3. Yeah. After meetings, you get a little recap, says, hey, this meeting was recorded. Here's the recording. Here's the transcript. And here's a summary. Well, you now have that summary that's going to go through. And that's great. You can catch up quickly. You can ask that question, say, hey, were there any particular things mentioned about Project X, or did, Jennifer talk about Y, or was I mentioned? Do I have any deliverables that were put on my plate? But also you can generate that if you want to sit through that meeting, but you don't want to sit through that, let's say an hour-long meeting and listen to all of it. You can have it turned into a podcast for you. So Aaron, they're coming for our jobs, maybe. Yeah, that's right. Although I think you and I are probably, hopefully, having a conversation that's slightly more interesting than like recapping a weekly team meeting. But they, so you have the ability to do that, and you can do it in all kinds of different styles. You can have anywhere from like 2 to 5 speakers. You can have it be like a news anchor style, or I forget some of the other styles, but much more compelling ways to listen to meetings if you're just got to like sit through and pick back up on, hey, what was covered? Either I'm in the car in a lot of cases where it's like, I can't safely read right now, but I still, I've got 45 minutes in the car. I could get through 2 or 3 meetings. If it can distill it for me, I can get through a couple of meetings. That's super, super valuable to me.
Is that kind of like the Google like Notebook LM?
Notebook LM? Yep. Similar, very, very similar in terms of output. Notebook LM is specific around, hey, give us a bunch of documents in context, and then we'll try and take that knowledge. This is more meaning based, but it's the same idea of, hey, let's take this content, let's distill it to the most important parts, and then let's turn it into a more digestible format that is more valuable, and let's take out extraneous things that may not hold as much value for you or may not be as germane to the point.
Okay, so Todd Hassenfeld over at Colgate-Palmolive, he'd showed me, they shot it over, like, this is a few months back.
Yeah.
They'd taken a bunch of the podcasts, right, and pulled it all into one notebook. Yeah. And then it was like, hit create podcast. And it created a podcast summary as a summary of all the podcasts that was phenomenal, with 2 people talking back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was, I don't know, it was incredibly fascinating. But
it's
if you
really
can do that,
cool.
Yeah, because then I can listen to it on the way into work, right?
Exactly. Right. Exactly. Yeah. And I think like one way I think about this is like the density of knowledge. Like, how dense is the knowledge that I'm taking in? So if I'm sitting through, like, I'm sure you've sat through hour-long meetings that were very, very low knowledge density. Like, you sat there, you needed one thing. Like, there was no reason, you couldn't skip the meeting because you needed to know one thing, but you needed to know one thing that was going to be 2 minutes of that 60-minute meeting. That's not great. The density of knowledge is not very high there. Even reading a summary of that meeting or reading the transcript might be slightly higher density, but is not that high. Now, if we can read a summary, that's higher density. If we can then ask Copilot and say, hey, I just need to know if a decision was made about Project Peregrine. Well, that all of a sudden is increasing that density of knowledge. So like thinking about the density of knowledge and going back to that minutes on mission, right? Like, how can we increase the density of knowledge such that what you are listening to, what you are reading, what you are intaking is the most valuable, relevant information to you and allows you to make better decisions and drive things forward.
That's awesome. I wouldn't want to go to an in-person meeting. I would want everything to be on Teams then. I want everything to be on Teams.
Yeah. I think it's moving that way. I think there's a lot of value to in-person collaboration, but I think for formal situations, especially when you're covering timelines and deliverables, when you are making decisions, I think there's a lot of value in having those recorded. Even if it's not to like pedantically hold people to account, but just the idea of, hey, this is held somewhere, right? Like, this is held knowledge that is not purely existing in Aaron as a project manager's head, right? Like, you don't want to have a single point of failure, either like as the single point of failure or as the person who's relying on a single point of failure. So when that knowledge is in a framework, you can then instantiate that into the organization in a way that is organically searchable, that you can bring back. And then again, we talked last time about we're doing a semantic index of your Microsoft tenant. So that knowledge, assuming that you have permissions to it, exists within that. So now if you say, hey, I need a timeline of Project Peregrine, like I know we worked on that, remind me where we're at. Well, because it was on Teams, we can pull that in. We can pull in your Teams chats. We can pull in an email you got about it. We can pull up a product requirements document that you have saved in Word on your OneDrive. And now we can create a unified vision of this is Project Peregrine. Here's everything you have seen or heard about it, be it if you were in that meeting or not. So I think there's a ton of value to in-person collaboration. And I am somebody who is definitely pro being in the office, at least some. Because I think just for me, especially somebody who's earlier in their career, like I want to be around people. I want to have those organic interactions. But when it comes to more structured decision-making process and like tribal knowledge is the wrong word, but to knowledge that we want instantiated, we want searchable, we want indexable, I think that's really valuable to have that captured somewhere. Even if you're all in a conference room, have a Teams meeting recording.
Right. No, wow.
There's a lot of good stuff. So
where was this when I was a project manager? Where was this?
I know. It's it was amazing. It was really interesting because we're getting, as we did in the first one, way off track. So we'll hopefully pull it back onto the rails a little bit in a little ways here. But when I started using the GPT-3 model before ChatGPT was released, And I was playing around with it because I was like, hey, this is a really cool tool. I'd seen some people do some cool stuff with it. And I was trying to use their API to interact with it because I wanted to custom train one on, I think statute of limitations is up. I was in college. I wanted to give it every paper I'd ever written and say, hey, write like me for purely experimental purposes. But I was trying to do that. And I am not a coder by training. I am competent, but certainly not skilled. And so I was having a lot of trouble. I was running into issues. And the night ChatGPT came out, I was playing with OpenAI's stuff, and the site refreshed. And there was like new little tabs that chat with GPT, I think was what they like maybe originally even branded it as. And so I clicked on it and I was like, oh, this is really cool. I can go back and forth. I can ask it questions. I'm trying to set up this API call. How do I do that? Help me write some code. And so I have been using I was using ChatGPT the night it came out, and it was a really impressive experience. I think I turned in the first homework assignment that had been through ChatGPT like within a couple days. Because I have always preferred working to schooling. I was working 30, 35 hours a week while I was in college at a tech startup, that InsurTech that I mentioned last time. So I was really excited about it. So it's been fascinating to see the progression over time and see the tools get better. And I think probably the axis along which they have improved the most is their ability to understand and retain context about you, and therefore give you a better answer. Because we talked about this last time. Like, I can run raw models on silicon. The outputs really aren't that impressive until I give it all that context about me, all that information, link it back to things. And so there's a very like non-linear axis of, at first, when I was first interacting with ChatGPT, it only had memory of that conversation. It didn't have this like shared context. It didn't have infinite context windows. It didn't have custom instructions. So you had a really narrow set of context that you could give it. That has evolved over time and expanded over time. And now when you get to something like Copilot, which maybe, like it's an OpenAI underlying model, but it has the instantiation of all of the information that is available to you within your tenant. And so like that is massively, massively impactful. And I think people may not realize that like the tools getting better is good, but the rate of progress is really coming from the tool's ability to integrate into your environment, into your tools, and into your data. And so we can then use that as a segue back into how it integrates into your tools and finally answer some of the questions that we started this whole thing with.
Yeah. Well, let's keep rolling. Are there other things with teams that are big?
I think that is the big three. We are trying and demoing so much stuff that I think there's probably always more, but the big three that I would think about are like the chat in the sidebar, meeting recordings and summarizations, and then agents, which is sort of an expansion off of Copilot, but is using that same AI and facilitator. I talked a little bit about translation. Like one of the really interesting things that we saw was I was with a CIO and a CTO of a fairly major university recently, and they were talking about their stance at AI and how they were approaching it as a university and what they were thinking. And we were just, like I said, the beauty of the work I do is that I get to bring these people into a lab. I have a fair amount of time, and it's a very informal environment. I can close the door and we can talk about whatever they want to talk about. And so we were just playing with stuff. We were experimenting, and that's the goal. And they said, hey, how does it do with languages? And I said, it's actually really pretty good at translating. And they said, okay, do you know what languages it knows? I don't have the slightest clue. I've seen some of the like big ones, but I don't know. They said, how does it do with Haitian Creole? I don't know. They said, interestingly, the third most spoken language at our university is Haitian Creole. And this is a large university on the East Coast, Atlantic seaboard. And we're like, that's interesting, but let's try it. So we went out to Bing, found a translator, translated, hey, can you help summarize my emails and give it to me in this format and do this? Translated into Haitian Creole, copied that, put it in Copilot, asked Copilot. Copilot comes back with a wall of Haitian Creole. And we said, I have no idea what that says, but let's find out. So we take that, translate it back to English, and sure enough, it had done it. And so it has the ability, this is in Teams but across, to operate as that universal translator. And I think we touched on this last time, like it is actually going one layer below where it is tokenizing language, but it's not looking at language. It's looking at the relationships between things, and it's trying to distill to the actual underlying meaning of something, not the abstraction of language, which is like one layer up, right? We try and find the right words to say what we are meaning to say, but there's actually one layer below language of your actual intent and meaning. AI is good at getting down towards that, and that allows it to then abstract away language and say, I can translate this meaning back up because I understand the underlying meaning, versus having to translate word for word or character for character. So it's really valuable in that way, and we're seeing that use case not just on language, but across things, like sensor systems. So you're able to see like multiple sensor systems that all may have different polling rates. They may all return in different formats. Like I said, it's sort of like different intervals, different formats, different styles, different pipelines in. Well, AI has the ability, like before, if you wanted to fuse a whole bunch of sensor systems that all of these disparate input styles, you had to build a really complex system that said, all right, I should expect something every 10th of a second from over here, every 1/8 of a second from here, every half second, every 5 seconds. And all of those are going to be in different formats and tell me slightly different things, right? Like let's imagine like radar systems or something. Well, this one is looking for large objects. This one's looking for small objects. I need to fuse all of that into a single vision. That's an incredibly complex system. With AI, you're able to take all these disparate sensor feeds and then bring them into a sort of universal substrate and then work back off of that. So universal translation is really valuable. And that's one of the cool ones. Like we have these, when we go through the lab experience next door, we have these Surface hubs that have batteries that are these like 55-inch video boards. We can pull up Teams and we can bring in remote participants. And we can use those to translate. So we had a group from the South Korean government a little while ago, and about half the group spoke English and half the group didn't. And so we grabbed a Teams board, started a Teams meeting, turned on live translate with captions, and wheeled that around with us. And those that didn't speak English, we also had a professor translating, but he could use the board and say, yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, here's something I want to elaborate on a little bit. But we had the ability to do that in live time, do a live translation while we walk through with a crowd, which was really a very cool experience to have.
It's awesome.
It's super cool. It's super cool. Okay, I think finally we owe the people some talk on tools and how this actually integrates. So let me talk through like the scenario that we often use when I have people in the lab. So mostly it's federal government executives. So we say, hey, congratulations, you are part of a new federal government agency. It's just been created. You're all now deputy administrators. For some of you, that may be a promotion. For some of you, demotion. But for today, that's what you are. Just go with me. And so we start out by going, okay, your administrator has to present before Congress at the end of the week. Your job is to help her prepare for that. So let's start by understanding what you actually have to do. So let's go to Copilot chat and let's say, hey, help me summarize my emails or my communications even. And it's going to come back and it's going to give you, hey, here's everything in your inbox and your Teams messages and all this stuff. And it's going to pull it together sort of into buckets. And then we say, help me prioritize. I want to prioritize by due date. I want to prioritize by the importance of the person who gave it to me. I want to prioritize by how fast it's going to be to achieve. And so we get that. And one of the primary things that we have to do is create a talk track for this congressional briefing and then create a PowerPoint. So the way that we'll do this is we go in Copilot chat and we say, okay, well, there's a 30-page charter for this organization. That's probably a good place to start. If we're going to brief Congress on who we are and what we want to do, let's start with the charter. So you've got this like 30-page, pretty dense document that would be tough to read through. You can go into Copilot and say, help me understand, and then use that slash that we talked about to call to the specific document within your tenant. I want to understand this document. Do that. It's going to come back and say, hey, here's the structure of the document. Here's what it says. Here's broadly an overview. Well, that's great. Now we've got an understanding of this 30-page document. Now we go from there into, let's turn it into a talk track. Like, let's build a script out of this. So I want to present to a congressional audience, and I want to focus first on mission and vision, let's say. And we do that. We get a script. We go, okay, that looks pretty good. Then we go in and say, all right, I want to look at like the 5 key pillars of what we're going to deliver as an organization. And we call it the FRGSA, Future Ready Government Services Agency. So this, is a fictional agency that we made up that's designed to implement AI into the federal government. So we do that. We create the next section, and then we say, all right, Copilot, turn that into a Word document. Copilot's going to take those 3 sections, turn them into a Word document. We've now got a Word document. So now we take this into Word. Quick tip for your listeners. This is like a lifesaver that I just discovered a little while ago. If you type word.new into a web browser, it will take you to a brand new empty Word document. Super great if you need to like quickly jot down meeting minutes or something. Same thing with PowerPoint.new, same thing with Excel.new. So if you get nothing else from this, there's a tip that might save you a few minutes.
Oh, it works.
That's good. It would be bad if it didn't. I do live demos all day, so I'm very familiar with things not working when I think they should. But it's nice. It's nice when every once in a while you do a live demo and the tech actually works. And
it opens it up in your
so you got that right in your web browser. Super quick way. So we are now in Word. We've got this script that's probably 2, 3, 4, 5 pages. So there's 2 places in most of the Office suite that you can interact with Copilot. There's an inline editor, or sort of an in-document editor, and there's a sidebar. The sidebar will be the little Copilot icon in the upper right. The inline or document editor will be in the middle somewhere. In Word, if you highlight any section, you'll see a little icon come up, normally to the left side. You can click on that and you'll get a little text box. And you have the ability to say, hey, Copilot, rewrite this with these instructions. I want it to be more focused on making the value prop for the end user very clear. I want this to be a little bit more combative. I want this to be toned way back. And you'll also see some pre-filled options that, hey, I want it shorter. I want it more formal. I want you to just rewrite it and clean it up a little bit. So you've got all those options. You can do that. It's going to generate the text. And then you can choose to either keep that, which is just going to insert it below. You can replace what you originally had written with it. You can have Copilot try again. You can delete it completely, or you can ask Copilot, hey, I want it a little bit more like this or like that. Give me another sort of an alteration on this. So there's your inline editor. And that allows you to copy a section of the document and go, hey, change it this way, change it that way. Here's what I'm hoping to get from this. Here's how I want this to be changed. Make it in this particular tone or this style. So there's your inline editor. And that's super valuable for wordsmithing. I frankly do a lot of that in chat. And I will go back and forth with chat until it's where I'm happy. I don't spend as much time editing word for word, but I know some people like doing that and like being able to just tweak specific sections rather than having to deal with the entirety of the document. Are you, I see your second water. Are you following along here with your
totally
Word doc now? No, you're good. That's fantastic.
At the exact same time, because I'm blown away.
If anything's not working, tell me. I'll send a note to the team. We'll see if we can get a fix for you.
I'm literally doing it as we're going, and I'm pulling into Word.new documents and then having Copilot look at it along the side and then ask questions within it and have it kick it out.
Okay, so this is perfect. You're doing my segues for me. This is awesome. I appreciate it. It makes my life easy. I have some people just have this skill. I don't know what it is, but when we're doing tours or we're doing these things, there's always some person who raises their hand and asks a question that exactly leads to the next point. And they don't ever just do it once. There's just some people who have this skill to just anticipate all my segues and do them for me. And it's fantastic. They're my favorite. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, sorry. People are watching this good. Like you're the same as you. You see my eyes off to the side like I'm doing something else.
No, I'm not calling you out. I assumed that was what was happening. So I wanted to make sure it was working for you. So that's perfect.
It is working unbelievably well. And just pulling in other documents specific because it's not. Yeah, it's got
that semantic index of your tenant, right? So it has all the information within your secure tenant. And the beauty is, like we talked about, but I think this is always like critical to reiterate, is that when you are interacting with Copilot, it remains within your tenant. It does not leave. So your data is your data. We don't see it. We don't train on it. It doesn't leave your tenant. So it is the same level of security as any Word document you would save or email you would send. And I promised last time, actually, I realized that I promised last time that I would say there was one tiny asterisk on that. And so I should clear it up now just for semantics. If you have web grounding enabled, which means you have web search, obviously we can't store the entire internet within your tenant. So if you ask a question, and again, we talked about that orchestrator model that's trying to understand intent and say, hey, how do I need to solve this problem? And it goes, all right, to answer this question from Aaron, I probably should go to the internet and search something. Here's how it does that. It goes through, it goes, hey, here's what Aaron is asking. Here's the particular part that I need from the internet. I'm going to take that. I'm going to generate a search string. And then I'm going to take that and push it to Bing completely anonymously. So it's not tied to Aaron. It's not tied to your tenant. It's not tied to that it was particularly a Copilot request, and it does not include the entirety of your prompt. It just includes that specific little search substring that the LLM generated. And then it pulls those results back into your secure tenant. So it technically leaves your tenant. It does so in the most secure way we can find possible. But that is the one caveat as the only thing that will ever leave your tenant, your secure tenant, when you are interacting with Copilot. So I said that last time, and I don't think I ever followed up on the asterisks. So hopefully people that watch part one will also watch part two and hear that asterisk. So we've used the inline editor now where you can highlight and you can change text for any particular section. Next, like you said, you have the sidebar, which is that Copilot icon up in the upper right. That's where you can interact with the entirety of the document. This is less, it can be an editing focus, but it's actually less of an editing focus tool. So you'll see at the top, normally it'll auto-generate a summary for you of, hey, this is what you're looking at. Here's this document. Then you have the ability to interact with the entirety of the document. So you can say, help me anticipate for my scenario, what questions might I get from a left-leaning but broadly tech-positive congressional committee? I'm curious, right? I want to start to prepare for this testimony. So help me anticipate those questions, help me draft responses. Or how would I change this document if I wanted it to appeal more to X group of people, right? If I'm talking to now CFOs versus heads of HR, what should I change? What might stand out? What are the strongest arguments in this document? What are the weakest arguments? Right? If I was to take this to somebody who was sort of an adversary of this plan or this idea, what holes are they likely to try and punch in it? So you now have the ability to interact with that entire document and start to game plan out. If I take this to somebody, here's what's likely to happen. So that's the sidebar. You can edit from the sidebar, but in general, the sidebar is for like, hey, I want to interact with this at a document level and understand what's in this document and sort of question it.
Yeah, so I pulled in a doc, analyzing it, and then I'm asking it, what if I have to present this as a business case to Fortune 500, CEOs, CFOs, and then I can then use it as a prep doc, right? So if I have to go into a meeting, this is how I'm looking at using it. So I have a doc, right? Kind of what you're saying is at the end of the day, in this scenario, they're going in and presenting, right, to a government organization. In this case, I'm thinking I'm in corporate America, I'm presenting to a CEO, a board, a CFO. I use this as my prep.
Yes.
Pick holes in this. Ask me questions as if you are a CFO at Fortune or at my specific company.
Yeah.
Right. And it will.
And if the person's high enough profile, you can ask a specific person. You can say, what would Chuck Schumer think about this? And it'll like pull back. Now, the person, obviously, if you ask somebody that doesn't have a public persona, it's not going to be able to find much info. But if there's somebody who has a fair amount of writing, a fair amount of thinking out in the world, it's going to look at that, look at their policy stances, look at their beliefs. Obviously, I'm talking a little bit more from a government side, but the same thing is true, right? Like if you have a notable CFO or CEO that has writings out there, that has their opinion shared in the world, it can go out using that web grounding, pull that back in and say, all right, here's how they feel about X particular thing. So here's how they're likely to respond. So that one's really valuable. And like the other thing is you can prepare for these in voice mode. You can go back and forth. I prepared for our first podcast and this one by pulling up voice mode, put in some of your prior podcasts, said, I'm preparing to go on this show, go back and forth. I want you to be Aaron. Ask me questions, ask me follow-ups. We're going to stay in this role play back and forth. And then when I say end role play, stop and grade all my answers. How did I do? Did I talk for too long? Normally the case. Did I talk too short? Very rarely. How were my answers? Were they specific enough? So I had the ability to warm up and sort of take some dry runs and dial these answers in a little bit. And we talked, I think, last time about how the UK government is using this for children's services workers that are dealing with children going into the foster care system. So, it's great that I can give good answers on a podcast. That's fun. But it also makes a difference in really consequential use cases where if you're a social worker going to deal with a child who's had a traumatic experience and is coming into the foster care system, the first time that you think through those like questions that child might ask, the first time that you have that interaction, I don't know if we want it to be live in front of a vulnerable child, right? We want you to have the ability to try things and to fail and to iterate so that when you go into the actual meeting, you are better prepared. And that's not a novel idea.
No, I mean, it's
not a novel idea that, hey, we should prepare for these things. And they were doing it before. But the issue was you had to pull your coworker and say, hey, can you help me prepare? And that means they're not preparing for one of their meetings, right? So you can now double that throughput. Each of you can prepare and you can give all the case details to Copilot because it's within that secure tenant. And so now you have a sort of more realistic experience. So there's a lot of really valuable stuff in how you can use this tool. And it's amazing the use cases that people come up with. It's really impressive.
And again, I just go back to the thought we're getting to the end here.
Yeah.
This idea that these are tools to be used to increase your overall performance.
Yeah.
And like in the case of going in, you have the tool to train yourself to be better, and expectations are going to go up. I think right after this podcast, I have one with Uday and Bose from NetElixir. And he's got a cutting edge, like AI driven performance marketing agency, been around for over 20 years now. And he also is a professor. And one of the things he was getting into was around like interviewing people, new kids as they're coming out of college. And I call them, I guess, kids because, I've been, working for almost 3 decades now, right? Everybody becomes kids. Is you will be interviewing them plus their AI assistant. That's the reality and how adept they are at using it to be better.
Yeah.
And that's what these tools are. And if you're not using them, if you're not learning how to using them, try to use, you will be left behind because you will not be able to keep up. In this case, even your exact same level as somebody else, mentally, IQ, overall experience level, and they start using this to prep for a meeting and you are not,
Yep.
they will beat you in the meeting. And then
So did I use the toothpaste example last time? Did I talk about my neighbor going? So I think that applies both when we think about prompting AI. And for those that may not have heard it, I'll go through it very quickly. Imagine I'm going to the store. I see my neighbor mowing the grass and I say, hey, can I grab you anything from the store? I'm going. And he says, yep, I need toothpaste. So I go to the store. I get to the, pharmacy aisle and there's 75 bottles of toothpaste, tubes of toothpaste. Well, I have no more information aside from he wants toothpaste. So I grab Colgate White. That's what I use. Bring it back. And he goes, oh, okay, not really what I was looking for. I go, oh, sorry. Now, let's imagine that scenario, same thing. But instead, he goes, hey, yes, actually, my wife and I are going to Europe next week. We both have sensitive teeth and we hate the flavor bubblegum. Can you get us some toothpaste? Well, now I go to the store. I get to that same pharmacy aisle and I have gotten no smarter. I have no more tools. I have no more abilities. I have gained nothing except for some more context, except for some more ability or some more tool. Like he has given me better information to go on. And now I can get 2 tubes of Sensodyne in mint flavor, and I can bring them back for him. And all of a sudden in travel size. And so like that is true of prompting where the more specificity you give, but also same thing with tooling, right? You have 2 people. I went to the store 2 times and I gained no more capacity, no more ability, no more tooling. But this time I had the ability, like I had the advantage of information on my side. Well, now just expand that to imagine it's AI instead of information. Yeah. Or it's AI granting that information to me. Like I prepare for meetings by saying, hey, build me up a dossier on this person. These people are coming in. I want to know their background. What have they written? So you now have that ability. And so I think there's something to like, there's a massive displacement as you think about people who are able to effectively leverage these tools. The last thing I want to end on is that I know this can be a little bit intimidating. And it's like, this is a new technology and this is not an easy thing to necessarily pick up. It's an easy thing to start because it's right there and all you have to do is ask it a question, but it's intimidating to really get to some of these use cases. And I know I've talked about some like really cool use cases, but so much of this comes from just using it and just trying it. And the same is true for me, right? I find new things every week. I am lucky enough to get to sit in these sessions with these executives and see the questions they ask and the ways they want to use this. And almost every week somebody goes, can it do X? And I go, I have no idea. Let's try it and find out. So even somebody who is, like towards the front of this field, right? I think it would be hard to argue that I'm not sort of at the front of the AI adoption curve. There's a ton of stuff that I've never thought of. I've never used. And seeing other people start to pick these tools up, it comes from just using it. And sometimes you need a push from somebody, right? Like I have my mother, for example, I've pushed her a bunch and said like, hey, use this, try this. She had a contractor come over that gave her a quote that was really confusing for some work on the house. And it didn't make sense. And the pricing seemed a little shady. I said, take it, dump it into ChatGPT. Like I can help you later, but I'm not free right now. Dump it into ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever we have access to. And see what it says. Have it come back, have it try something. And so she is now getting more comfortable using this. So a lot of it comes from just starting somewhere. So I would say if you are somebody who's maybe earlier on the AI journey or hesitant because it feels like everybody else is using it for all these like amazing high-speed things and they've all figured out, nobody has it figured out. Everybody's trying stuff, test and learn, just start somewhere, right? You can start by just summarizing your emails and that puts minutes back on mission. So find the things that actually make a difference. Like a lot of these super fancy use cases are great, but they're incremental, right? We're doing that because we've already optimized a bunch of other stuff. So start somewhere. So that's the last thing I want to lead with is like, we've talked about a lot of really cool stuff that people are doing, but there's also a lot of really approachable, really easy use cases and start somewhere, right? You don't have to start with awesome stuff.
I totally agree. Just start, right? And don't compare your beginning to somebody else's middle or end, right? Just start, right? No builder just walked out, never touched a tool before and build a mansion.
Yeah.
Nobody.
Well, I'm talking about my wins today, right? Like I've had plenty of prompts that I did that were terrible, that I got terrible results. Like I am good at this sometimes. I also, and this is one of my coworkers talks about this. I think it's a great point. He said, when I use AI, I use it a lot. He goes, sometimes I spend an hour and I get nothing. So I go down an hour on productivity. Sometimes I spend 30 minutes and I get 3 hours worth of work done. So I go up 2.5 hours. He goes, I am net positive by a whole lot, but there are days where I lost time because I tried to use AI.
Yes, it's so true. And don't give up on it. Just because it's not working, because as you were saying earlier, it gets better every day.
This is the worst it will ever be.
It's the worst it will ever be. Yeah. Awesome. Well, Will, this has been so much fun. I mean, honestly, we'll probably have you back again.
I don't think we ever talked about Excel. I'm sorry.
I know. Well,
maybe we'll have to do a demo sometime where I can actually sit down and go hands on keyboard and show some stuff. Next time you're in DC, we can sit you down. We can do one of these. We can record it. Maybe we can publish some of that. We'll have to figure it out. I promise next time we'll get to Excel. It will be the first thing we will talk about. Nothing else until we get past your Excel question.
Well, thanks again so much for your time today. Thanks everybody for listening. And that wraps up this episode of the Digital Deep Dive. Thanks everybody for listening in.